Hello again, and we continue with our series on World War II special duties. And today we're going to talk about a book written about one of the special training schools that was set up by SOE. Now, we've mentioned about the paramilitary training up in Scotland. We reviewed the book on that, and that really was the main training pipeline for SOE, but they established training schools in other places, in the Middle East, the Far East and so on. But probably the most important overseas school was the one that they set up in Canada, and it's become known as Camp X. And this book by David Stafford, SOE and the American Connection, is a really complete and very detailed history of Camp X, or STS 103, as it was more formally known. David Stafford has done a lot in this area, and we previously reviewed his book on the SOE, Secret Agent. So the book is very, very detailed on the political and diplomatic and logistic problems and solutions to the establishment of Camp X in Canada, very, very near the United States border. And it was a very, very clever idea to have a training centre, even if it was only going to be used to train Commonwealth agents in secrecy in Canada, but the ability to bring America more closely into the war was a very, very clever idea. And it actually Camp X opened just after Pearl Harbor, so the timing, was immaculate, really. A lot of the description of this centres around BSC in New York, British Security Coordination, which was the office established in the Rockefeller buildings by the British government, which coordinated all elements of our intelligence community. So had representatives from SAS, MI5 and so on. So uniquely you had an organisation that worked together. And of course this was William Stevenson, and he was a Canadian, and he set the thing up and did a lot of very, very good work there. When the camp opened, the commandant was William Brooker, Bill Brooker. I think we mentioned him before because he had already worked at Bewley, the SOE finishing school, but they sent him over to Camp X. Now, the other main instructor that was sent over was William Fairbairn. And there's a section in the book, and unfortunately it's a direct quote from Knights of the Floating Silk by George Langley, and the usual off-duty as conversation was limited to 2 words, which I've demonstrated before does not refer to Fairbairn. It can't do. The description's just not there. It's a fantasy or an amalgamation, but it's not him. And unfortunately this keeps getting quoted in book after book after book. It becomes almost accepted. However, he does, David Stafford does give a thumbnail biography of Fairbairn, which is accurate, about Shanghai, working with the police there, how he trained in jiu-jitsu and then judo, and so on. It says the former Shanghai policeman, needless to say, was a specialised taste. Not everyone liked or could even tolerate him. And although he impressed a number of the recruits, he also made enemies among his colleagues at Camp X. Brooker found him vain, domineering and egotistical, and was not sorry when after a few weeks Fairbairn was loaned by SOE to train in America. Now, we'll just pause on that. Bill Brooker was, not to put too fine a point on it, a Walter Mitty. He made up stories about his exploits in order to impress the students and to win their confidence. He had very little in the way of relevant background to train secret agents, whereas Fairbairn was the master in CQB. He was, I call him the father of CQB, and that's what he was teaching there. It was his subject. He was the world authority on it, and he had a shed load of experience on the ground working in the world's most dangerous city. I'm not surprised there was a clash of personalities, and I come out on, as you may not be surprised, on the side of Fairbairn. But just to add another context to it, this is what the OSS thought about Fairbairn. The official history of the Schools and Training branch of the SOS, written at the end of the war, credited not simply Fairbairn's unquestioned knowledge and skill in close combat, but also the strength of his personality in building a cadre of able American paramilitary instructors and raising their confidence and morale to a very high level. You don't raise people's morale by being vain and boorish. So I think this quote by Brooker, which again has been repeated in other places, is not really fair. The book covers not only the training and the personalities, the other instructors that were there who were teaching things like demolitions. There was Paul Den, who later became a noted screenwriter and actually wrote the screenplay for a very, very good spy film. He was an instructor there, and then he goes on to talk about operations that were done. He quotes some of the Americans who came over and trained at Camp X, trained with Fairbairn and so on. For example, Richard Dunlop, who later said with OSS in Burma, was trained by the Shanghai Buster. All of us who were taught by Major Fairbairn soon realised that he had an honest dislike of anything that smacked of decency and fighting. Richard Helms, who later was director of the CIA, said he found the experience helpful in his later career. It put a man in the right frame of mind. It gave him a bearing of confidence and let him know the nature of the business in which he was engaged, which office routine at one end was treason, betrayal and violence at the other. Now, a major or a very interesting part of the book at the end is Camp X, Myth and Reality. And I found this very, very interesting because David Stafford does put a reality framework around a lot of the stories that have grown up around Camp X. And I'm not going to discuss them all, but some of the major operations of World War II done by the SOE in Europe had been attributed to training at Camp X, and that didn't happen. It wasn't true. But one of the things he talks about was Ian Fleming. Now, Fleming obviously created James Bond and really put the modern spy story on the map. And he did indeed go over to America. He met Stevenson. Because Fleming was working for the Director of Naval Intelligence, and he also met Donovan, and he had some chats with Donovan to the point where Donovan felt grateful enough to present Fleming with a 38 Colt revolver inscribed for special services. I mean, that's a fantastic little memento in itself. But just to egg the pudding, Fleming later claimed that he had undergone the syllabus at Camp X and had done very, very well and had completed all the training, whereas in reality none of the training staff, including the two commanding officers who between them were there for the whole time, can recall Fleming ever being there at all. So I think that does belong in the realms of myth. So Camp X, or STS 103, was a very important part in the wartime sabotage and subversion, particularly the relationship with the United States, and helping to train the personnel for what became OSS. And as such, the history is very, very relevant, and this book really is a great insight into that history.